Alright, welcome to English Comp. This is your final review. If you print out your PDF or have that with you, you can kind of follow along. This is what your final will look like, right? You'll be taking it online, and so the order may not necessarily be the same, but this is the content that I want you to get. So there'll be a couple of them that I won't give you the answer for, that you have to go back in and look, but for the most part we'll kind of work our way through these, and as long as you get this core material down, I think you have learned the basis of what I wanted you to get out of this course, right? Okay, so let's get started. Number one, there is no such thing as writing, only rewriting, right? That's just kind of a nice little quote to have, that the real process is in the rewriting, not in your first draft. Nobody just writes something and it's the way it's supposed to be. The actual process is not really writing, it's actually rewriting. And that's what produces what you see in magazines, what you see in books. That is not just technically just writing. It is actually a form of rewriting that you are receiving, right? Okay, number two. Discuss 3 problems discussed in class that are caused by students trying to write in the same way that they speak, right? So we went through that a little bit, so kind of up to you on this one. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Sometimes people write in cliches that they always use, like, you know what I mean, or things like that. So that's an example of someone writing poorly because they're writing how they speak. Now I want you to give me 2 other examples of that. We went over a few in that video. Number 3, discuss the connection between your reading and writing. Basically what I want there is something to the idea that the more you read, the better you are able to write correctly, that your brain processes the reading that you do, and that actually influences your ability to write. Number 4, explain how it might be harder to write something shorter than to write something longer. Well, basically what I'm getting at with this is that to write something shorter often takes more thought, because to be concise and to be correct and accurate and clear means you have to go back in and rewrite it. When somebody's just writing something really quick off the top of their head, they tend to ramble a little bit. So in order to make it clear, short, and concise, it takes a little more thought. Number 5, the goal of writing is communication. Right? It's communication. So whatever you have to do to communicate your point. Sometimes in writing you don't want to just tell them what you think, right? You want them to understand why you think that way, right? You don't want to just tell them what happened in a story. You want them to see it, right? So writing is to communicate, and that often is more than just stating something matter-of-factly, right? That there is an art to successful communication. Number 6, discuss the difference between an idea and a topic. So what I'm after here, we talked about this a little bit in one of the videos. The idea is that your topic is the general overarching thing that you want to write about. The idea is the specific angle you're going to take in that topic. So, a topic could be the Titanic, right? But your idea is that if the Titanic had a different set of navigation principles, it might not have hit the iceberg, right? Or something like that. That's your idea. The topic is the Titanic. So a teacher, the reason this is important for a college writing class is that your teacher may give you a topic which is very broad. One of the first steps to kind of narrowing down your thinking and being able to focus your research so you can be more effective is to figure out what is the idea you want to write about that is involved in that topic, right? And so developing that initial idea helps you to get your research more focused, right? So that, because if you're going to spend 3 hours of researching and you haven't picked an idea yet, you could be spending some of that research looking at things that have nothing to do with what you're eventually going to write about. So before I do my research, I always want to know what is my idea. It doesn't mean I couldn't change my ideas. I kind of get in and I see some things a little bit, but for the most part, you don't want to just research a topic. You want to take their topic, think initially of what idea you want to write about, then research your idea, things that apply to the idea. There's a lot of things about the Titanic that wouldn't have anything to do with the navigation rules it was using, right? And so if I know that's what I'm going to write about, then I can skip a lot of other things and go right to research for that. So it's always important before you're doing your homework to kind of narrow your stuff down to a specific idea. Number 7, in your own words, discuss the process of taking an idea through to a completed paper. So what I'm wanting there is once the teacher gives you the topic, you've got your idea. We kind of went through an order, right, when I was talking about putting together your outline and some of that kind of stuff about how you go from an idea to a completed paper. And so I want you to, in your own words, just kind of talk about that process. Research is involved, putting together an outline is involved, starting up some sentence ideas, getting your structure together, then going back and writing and rewriting. So I want you to discuss the process of going from idea to completion. Right? Number 4, list 4 writing elements that can be added to enhance your style. So this is things like references, right? Quotes from someone. That's something you could put in to enhance your style. Illustrations. Good use of subject headings. Maybe a bulleted list. Maybe a table or a chart. There's some things like that. That's what I'm after. You just need 4. Number 9, discuss 3 important elements for sentence length, right? So kind of 3 rules, if you will, of sentence length. I gave you a few. So kind of, one would be you don't want sentences that are too long, Run-on sentences is a very common problem when people begin to write. So you want to make sure that you have a good sentence, but not too long. Generally, perhaps 20 words. You want to vary your sentence length. That's another one. You don't want to count all of your sentences out to be 20 words and everything be right. Every once in a while, you want to maybe have a short 4 or 5 word rather sentence that kind of breaks up your structure there just a little bit. You want to have, in terms of sentence length, only one main idea per sentence. Another thing that we talked about was that long sentences tend to lose people in the middle of them, and they have to go back and figure out, you probably reread sentences before. When you're reading something, you get halfway through the sentence and you have to start back at the beginning again and reread that sentence. Oftentimes that's because that sentence might have been too long to communicate properly. Doesn't mean that they're wrong grammatically. It just means overall, if you want to have a great paper that people can understand easily, you have to watch having some of your sentences be too long, right? Okay. So in any of those, you just need 3. Number 10, discuss the idea of thought precision, right? We talked about being interestingly clear. Doesn't mean just simple, but you want to be clear. Sometimes it's harder to be clear with just a couple of words. You have to think through it. What is the best way to say this in just a couple of words that's clear and precise? Avoid using just big sounding words just to make it sound important or intellectual. You won't, if you don't use a sentence or a word rather in a sentence on a regular basis, just throwing it into an academic paper to make it sound academic normally doesn't work. It normally doesn't fit in with the flow. You want to put thought into the best way to say everything. That's the general idea that I want you to convey there, is that when you're going back in and rewriting, it's not just looking for errors in your punctuation or typos, that you're going back in your rewriting process to correct thought precision as well. Areas where you said something in a way that's kind of clumsy, and it would be better if you rewrote that particular phrase with some different words or cut out a word or two so that the thought is precise. And that's a big part of correcting your paper above and beyond just typos, right? Okay. And that really adds to your style, right? How you craft your sentences is more than just getting the bare minimum of punctuation and no typos, right? All right, number 11. Why is it important to not start your sentences with a dependent phrase? Dependent phrase means, you're kind of starting from the beginning with a phrase that doesn't include your subject. And so if your opening phrase doesn't include your subject, it's dependent on a subject. That's what it means to be a dependent clause. It means that there's a subject somewhere that phrase that you just said is dependent on. And so if you start with that, or in any way put your subject in the middle or the end of your sentence, then what happens is people have to go back and reread the sentence, because your brain doesn't capture sometimes. When you give somebody what happened before you tell them who it happened to, a lot of times that becomes confusing. They have to go back in once they get to the end of your sentence and figure out who it happened to. Then they'll have to start back in the beginning of the sentence and reread what actually happened. They're not able to picture it in their mind as easily if you put the subject at the end of the sentence. So it's important to have, for the most part, the majority of your sentences, you want to start with the subject somewhere in the opening phrase there. Okay. 12. What is passive voice? Passive voice is any kind of sentence or phrase that the actor is missing. The subject is not there, right? The person doing the action is left out, right? So I could say the ball was hit. So it's not necessarily that the subject would be the ball, so there's still a subject, it's a complete sentence, but the person doing the action is missing. The ball was hit. What I didn't tell you, that's a complete sentence, the ball was hit, but what that sentence doesn't include is who did the action, who hit the ball, right? So it has a subject, but it has no actor, right? It has no person who did the action of the verb, right? So the verb is it was, and then object is hit. It was hit, but you don't know who did it, right? So that's a passive voice. What is a vague qualifier? So your vague qualifiers are words like very, totally, extremely, really, somewhat. They're trying to convey something, but they're real vague about it. They're not clear, they're not precise. So if you use a lot of the word very, a lot of totally, a lot of really in your writing, you're being very vague, right? It was really great. That's a vague thing. That's something that you say when you talk, as opposed to saying something a little more concrete. Instead of saying it was really great, you could say it was the third best score this year, or something like that. A little more precise, as opposed to saying, oh, it was a really great game, or something, Okay. 14. List the two forms of pronouns. So you have subjective and objective, right? So you got subjective pronouns, objective pronouns. You can go back in and look at that video if you need to. Number 15. Pronouns that come after to be verbs. Your to be verbs are the is, are, was, were, been. Those are all forms of to be. They're always in what form? That's subjective. So we have the two types of pronouns. There's a whole list of them that were subjective, a whole list of them that are objective form. So if they're coming after one of these to be verbs, they're always in the subjective form. Okay. True or false? Contractions should be avoided in academic writing. That's true. In your academic writing, for the most part, you don't want to have contractions, right? Okay. Number 17. List the rule for use of a and an. Let me see here. Whenever you're putting in the a, let me see here. Pull up this lesson. You want to put a before your vowel sound, right? So an comes before the consonant sound, right? So a cow or an owl. So a So I always get these confused. That's why I pulled up the lesson. A comes before the consonant sound. So if I just said that backwards, forgive me. A comes before the consonant sound. An comes before the vowel sound. Right? So if you had A, you would say a cow. So A goes with the consonant. An goes with the vowel. Best thing to do is just memorize those, which I've yet to do. Pretty simple rule, actually. But it's A comes before the consonant, An comes before the vowel. Right? Okay. And that's an example of how you turn the easiest question into the most complicated. But so one more time. A comes before a consonant, and comes before a vowel. Number 18. List 3 comma rules. So these next two list the 3 comma rules and list the 3 semicolon rules, and this last one, the dash, I want you to do on your own. So go back in, look at that punctuation video. I gave probably 10 comma rules, so you just got to get 3 of them. You might even remember those off the top of your head. And then the semicolon rules, I probably only gave you 3 or 4 of those. So that's going to be most of the semicolon rules that I gave you. And then the dash. What is the main purpose of the dash, right? Okay. So you should have no problem with these. If you have any questions, you can always shoot me an email. But this is the basic form of your final, right? But like I said, the computer, when it gives it to you, will change the order that they come in. But this will be the questions, right? So you'll go back in. You have to type all of your answers, right? So you want to have studied a little bit, and then put whatever you're using to study. Go ahead and put that up. I mean, you're on the honor system, and then take your final, and you should be able to type these in a decent amount of time, because you've seen these questions. I mean, I'm not trying to make it real secretive here. This is what I think is the most important part of the class, and so if you get this part, you'll do great on the final.